Back in the 1950s, there was this company town called Victory, located near the California desert. People lived seemingly perfect lives there. Every morning the husbands would head to work at Victory headquarters, while the wives stayed home, taking care of the house and attending ballet lessons taught by their instructor Shelley. The wives were strictly not allowed to ask about their husband's work or visit the headquarters. Alice and Jack were one of the happy couples in Victory, known for their lively social life and intimate moments. They often hosted parties for their neighbors, especially Alice's closest friend, Bunny, and her husband. Alice had this favorite song she'd hum while doing her chores. Sometimes the town experienced minor tremors, but Jack never talked about any connection to Victory's projects, and Alice didn't push for answers. One day after ballet class, Alice and Bunny gossiped about their friend Margaret, who had become an outcast after some mysterious incident. Later, Alice spotted Margaret in her backyard, looking entranced by a toy plane and muttering about strange visions. Alice wasn't sure what to make of it, so she ignored her during dinner prep. While cooking, Alice found all the eggs in her carton empty, but she got distracted when her meal started burning. At a pool party hosted by Shelley, Bunny got annoyed with Alice's constant humming of her favorite song. Alice realized she didn't recognize the song stuck in her head, even though it had always been there. Strange images accompanied the melody, but she dismissed them when they distracted her. The party briefly halted as Shelley and her husband Frank, the CEO of Victory, welcomed the new neighbors. Margaret interrupted, questioning their presence, but her husband quickly removed her. Frank tried to ease the tension by emphasizing Victory's mission of creating a safe and orderly community. Concerned for Margaret, Alice searched for her and discovered her being medicated by her husband. Margaret confided in Alice about her distressing dreams and her belief that they were hiding something, but her husband intervened, shutting Alice out. Back at the party, Alice found Jack in Frank's room, where he initiated intimacy unexpectedly. Their encounter became uncomfortable when Frank silently observed them before leaving. Alice didn't tell Jack about the incident. The next day, while shopping with her friends, they discussed Margaret's odd behavior since her ordeal. Bunny revealed that Margaret broke a crucial rule and ventured into the desert with her child, likely due to a hallucination. Despite Margaret's claim that her child was taken as punishment, they never found him. The conversation was interrupted by another tremor, which the women ignored out of habit. One of them speculated about rumors regarding the men developing weapons, but Bunny interrupted angrily, asserting that the wives' sole duty was to support their husbands and not question them. That night, Alice experienced bizarre dreams that lingered into the next day. Seeking solace, she took the trolley for some fresh air, but remained on board, captivated by the desert view, much to the driver's surprise. Suddenly, a plane resembling Margaret's toy crashed in the desert. Despite Alice's concern for potential survivors, the driver refused to deviate from the route, disregarding the rules. Alice ventured into the desert alone and discovered a hill with a spiral road leading to a mysterious dome. Calling out for help yielded no response, but she bravely approached the dome, touching its walls and triggering a disorienting experience filled with unsettling images and Frank's voice discussing chaos. Awakening back in her bed, Alice found Jack cooking in the kitchen, confused about her return and mentioning the plane crash. Jack assured her it didn't happen, so Alice brushed it off as a bad dream, comforted by Jack's gestures and humor. The following day, while cleaning the windows, Alice was startled as the wall behind her moved, pinning her against the glass. Terrified, Alice pushed against the wall, only for it to return to normal in an instant, realizing it was a hallucination. The phone rang, and Margaret voiced her concerns about the town's deceit and urged Alice to leave, but Alice dismissed her, asserting her sanity before hanging up. Despite her efforts to shake off the conversation, it haunted Alice, culminating in a disturbing experience during ballet class, where she saw her reflection transform into Margaret. Initially mimicking Alice's movements, Margaret suddenly started hitting her head against the glass, causing Alice to scream in panic. No one else noticed, and when Alice looked again, Margaret was gone. Concerned, Alice rushed home to find Margaret perched atop her house. Desperate to intervene, Alice pleaded with Margaret, who disregarded her and jumped, leaving Alice in shock. Attempting to reach Margaret, Alice was stopped by men in red jumpsuits who forcibly removed her. That evening, Alice confided in Jack, but he dismissed her concerns, citing Margaret's husband's reassurances that it was an accident. Feeling dismissed and desperate for answers, Alice confronted Jack about his job and the company's secrets, leading to a heated exchange where Jack implored her to drop the subject. Alone and disturbed, Alice tried to distract herself by watching TV, only to experience a new hallucination of drowning in a pool. Feeling disoriented, Alice found herself standing against the window as if she had attempted to leave, reminiscent of the wall trapping her. The following morning, while wrapping leftovers, Alice's hands moved involuntarily, wrapping part of her body before she snapped out of it, realizing she was losing control. Alice struggled to come to terms with her state of mind. Shortly after, Jack brought Dr. Collins for a checkup. Collins attributed Alice's behavior to stress from witnessing Margaret's fall, suggesting medication, which both Jack and Alice declined. Intrigued by Collins's classified files on Margaret, Alice questioned him, learning that Margaret's paranoia disrupted her husband's work at Victory, leading to his termination and Margaret's relocation for treatment. After Collins and Jack left, Alice seized the opportunity to investigate the briefcase, but was interrupted by Collins's return. She pretended to retrieve the briefcase for him, successfully concealing her snooping. Later on, Alice discovers that Margaret's files are heavily censored, with lots of stuff blacked out. She decides to burn them in the fireplace while thinking about what happened to Margaret and drowning her sorrows in whiskey to numb her guilty feelings. Just moments later, still sipping on her drink, Alice's mind starts drifting during her bath, revisiting those disturbing images along with brief glimpses of a loving couple. She snaps back to reality when Jack comes home, playing music. While Alice is still reeling, Jack surprises her by suddenly bringing up the topic of having a baby. Feeling overwhelmed, Alice agrees to consider it. Later that evening, they attend a fancy party hosted by Frank at a restaurant. Alice feels uneasy as Frank's gaze follows her, especially when he's conversing with Collins in the corner. On the verge of a breakdown, Alice is further distressed when a dancer's performance triggers memories of her visions. Tearful, she pleads with Jack to leave, but he remains engrossed in the festivities as Frank announces his promotion. Overwhelmed, Alice retreats to the bathroom, where the vision of the couple reappears. Bunny interrupts, scolding Alice for disrupting the event and reminding her of her role as a supportive wife. With no choice, Alice suppresses her turmoil and resumes her routine. Days later, Jack hosts a dinner party attended by Frank and Shelley. While Alice cooks, Frank approaches her, expressing his fascination and desire for her to challenge him in the future, believing that great men can only change history when pushed. During dinner, Alice deliberately takes the head of the table, positioning herself to directly face Frank. She disrupts the usual small talk, probing the guests about their past before moving to Victory, highlighting the repetition of similar stories and the town's efforts to suppress the truth, particularly regarding Margaret. Despite Jack's attempts to intervene, Frank encourages Alice to continue, leading her to unleash a tirade exposing Frank's deception in constructing a facade of perfection. Frank maintains composure, dismissing Alice's claims as symptoms of psychosis and even insinuating impropriety between them. The atmosphere grows tense, with Shelley admonishing Alice for her outburst before storming out, followed by the other guests. Frank, expressing disappointment, exits after them, leaving Alice seething. When Jack returns, he accuses her of ruining the evening, but Alice vehemently denies it, asserting her priority of their relationship over their life in Victory and urging him to flee with her. After persistent pleading, Jack relents, agreeing to escape together. As they hastily pack essentials, Alice is surprised when Jack unexpectedly apologizes, signaling a shift in their dynamic. Alice's confusion intensifies as the men in red forcibly remove her, leaving Jack distraught as he listens to her cries. Taken to the hospital for electroshock therapy, Alice endures immense pain while experiencing visions of a modern-day life with Jack, where she works as a doctor to support them both. However, the strain of double shifts takes its toll on her, exacerbated by Jack's lack of support and expectations for intimacy despite her exhaustion. Meanwhile, Jack finds solace in Frank's podcast, which promotes an alternative lifestyle away from societal norms. Eventually, Alice wakes up back in the hospital in Victory, declared fixed by Collins, and returned to her previous routine without memory of her ordeal. Days passed peacefully until Jack, seemingly unaware of Alice's turmoil, arrives home singing the familiar song. It's then revealed that the modern-day Jack from Alice's visions is real and has joined the Victory Project, granting him access to a machine that simulates their ideal life, with Alice unwittingly connected to it 247. As the truth unfolds, Alice learns that all the wives in Victory are connected to similar simulation machines, with their husbands controlling their experiences for a few hours each day outside of the simulation. Jack tends to Alice's real body and works menial jobs to afford the machine's upkeep. Overwhelmed by the revelation and the images flooding her mind, Alice confronts Jack, who defensively justifies his actions, claiming he did it for their happiness. However, Alice sees through his manipulation and resents him for taking away her autonomy and gaslighting her. Jack reveals that even their children in the simulation aren't real. Overcome with anger and betrayal, Alice strikes Jack with a glass, unaware that dying in the simulation results in real-life death. As Jack succumbs, Frank receives news of the incident. Bunny arrives, revealing her own participation in the simulation to cope with the loss of her children in real life. She implores Alice to disconnect herself at the headquarters, as Jack can no longer do it for her. Despite her fear, Alice complies, discovering her neighbors also awakening from the simulation as chaos ensues with exploding street lights. The women begin to realize the truth, while the men focus on stopping Alice and inquiring about Jack's fate. Bunny emerges to fend off the men, allowing Alice to escape in a car just before the men in red pursue her. A high-speed chase ensues through the streets, with Alice successfully leaving town but encountering trouble in the desert as the men in red relentlessly ram her car. Dr. Collins joins the pursuit but ends up colliding with the others at Alice's maneuver, resulting in his demise. Meanwhile, Frank receives the news of Collins's death, triggering Shelley to take matters into her own hands by fatally stabbing Frank at home. In the desert, Alice navigates towards the hill but faces a setback when her car gets stuck on a sharp turn. Determined, Alice continues on foot, hoping the obstruction will deter her pursuers. However, the men in red abandon their vehicles and give chase on foot, forcing Alice to push herself to her limits to reach the dome at the top of the hill. Amidst exhaustion, Alice experiences hallucinations of Jack urging her to stay, prompting memories of their life together. Realizing her purpose, Alice reaches the dome and places her hands on the glass, triggering a flood of disturbing images mixed with snippets of her real memories. As everything fades to black, Alice gasps, signaling a pivotal moment in her journey.